Welcome to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Seravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com. Delivered by DoorDash.
Welcome to episode 101 of the DFO Rundown, delivered by DoorDash. All your favorites delivered right to your door. It's easy, it's convenient, and if you're like Frank Seravalli, you probably really could have used it as a Philadelphia Frank. You guys just been getting pummeled. Something like almost a foot of snow. How's your shoveling skills?
Not very good, and it really depends on where you live. It was crazy. Like some places ended up with 18 inches of snow in southern New Jersey in one fell swoop. So it's been some cold living here for our neck of the woods, and my back is definitely feeling it.
18 inches, that's like a foot and a half. So is that just chaos then in those areas? Like, is the city shut down for a bit?
Pretty much, yeah. We had a snow emergency, and in fact, at the Flyers game on Saturday afternoon against the Kings, whoever actually made it to the game, they said, no matter where your ticket is, come sit in the lower bowl, free hot dogs and sodas. So those who were brave enough to venture out and test the roads, they were rewarded at the Flyers game on Saturday.
Oh, I like that. Free hot dogs and soda. Nothing wrong with that.
I mean, it's pretty much the best they could give these fans that have dealt with this season for them, because they almost blew it again. They snapped the winless streak at 13, but they had leads of 2-0 and 3-1 in that game and still managed to get to overtime.
What do you make of the coaching addition in Philly?
Window dressing. I mean, and no offense to John Torchetti. I mean, they have some significant problems there. And I think they were a little bit short-staffed on the bench anyway, in terms of replacing Michel Therrien. And, I think they're in a spot where, any additional voice or insight will help, but it's not going to change their season. They need a drastic overhaul. And I'm still a little bit blown away by the comments that Comcast Spectacor president and CEO Dave Scott made in backing Chuck Fletcher, saying this is not going to be a 2, 3, or 4 year rebuild. He said, I'm giving Chuck Fletcher and the Flyers a blank check. That's an exact quote, blank check. Like, how many people, how many GMs and agents around the league began salivating, saying, blank check? Like, you mean we could offload some of our guys? You mean we could get, potentially squeeze a few extra bucks out? Obviously, Chuck Fletcher isn't thinking about it that way, but I just feel like teams always get themselves in a bit of trouble when they are thinking quick turnaround as opposed to methodical and covering all your bases. Because I don't see a quick path forward for the Flyers.
What are the chances this was the proverbial kiss of death? Because how many times has a GM come out and said, no, my coach is good, and then within 2 weeks they're gone? Any chance of that, Frank?
I do think that I don't think there's any question that Chuck Fletcher's on the hot seat. He prefaced his vote of confidence by saying, quote, right now, Chuck Fletcher is my guy. I mean, anytime anyone says that, yes, you have to at least take a long look. I guess my argument would be, if Chuck Fletcher is going to be the guy, then allow him to continue to be the guy at the controls well, into the summer and into next season. Don't let him get through the trade deadline and then make a change in the summer. I don't think that makes any sense.
I agree with you. Yes, wholeheartedly. I've never understood that at all. So,
and that's why it's so interesting that Chicago and Anaheim are likely going to have new GMs in place before the deadline, because this is a really significant, time of change for teams. Trade deadline and the draft, like that. Those are your two opportunities to remake your team, and that's it for the whole year. So you've got to make hay in those opportunities and windows.
The Ducks GM, Frank, like if you look at those two organizations and you look at the youth in Anaheim, like that's a really enticing gig to be the GM in Anaheim. I have to think that they've, like, obviously there's only 32 jobs. Every GM job is pretty unique, but Anaheim's one where you come in, you've got a legit goaltender in Gibson, you've got some legit defensemen. They've got some tough decisions to make, no question, with Manson and all these other pending UFAs, Raquel and stuff, but man, they've got some really good pieces in Anaheim. And that might be, out of the two jobs, if I had a pick to which one I'd want, you'd want the Anaheim job, wouldn't you?
I think it's a top 10 job in the league, given what you'd be starting with, given the people you'd be working for in the Samuelis. By all accounts, like really, really nice people and good people to work for, and that they just let you do your job. They're hands off. They don't try and meddle or pry into hockey operations decisions. They show up and they're fans. Like, honestly, couldn't have a better spot. Quality of living is like, honestly, there's not a lot, the pressure isn't exorbitant. If you're, trying to hold down one of these jobs in the league, I think it's a pretty good one to start with the base that they have. And also, everything is pretty much spoken for. Like, they've got a head coach in Dallas Eakins who, certainly should be getting some consideration for the Jack Adams. And, that youth that's there, the tradable assets that are there, the cap space that's there, it's a home run.
Who do you see as leader, or who are you hearing as leading candidates for the Ducks?
Elliot Friedman mentioned on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday that Pat Verbeek is a strong candidate. I could see that. The only thing that surprised me a little bit is that he's Steve Yzerman's right-hand man, and has been going back to Tampa. So, he'd be branching out and going at it on his own. But Pat Verbeek, in terms of respect around the league, in terms of sheer man hours and hard work and diligence that's been put into this point, certainly a well qualified candidate. And one of the big things that the Ducks are looking for in their search is character, especially after what they went through with Bob Murray. They want to be known as an A+ organization in terms of how they treat people. And certainly, that's a big part of their search, is checking through and making sure that their list is full of quality people in addition to quality candidates.
And the trade deadline is basically 6 weeks away. And you look at it, there's obviously a clear separation in the East, the West. There's some teams that I think, like the Dallas Stars, man, Joe Pavelski, he's going to get himself a really good contract. But when you consider his playoff track record, his experience, and his current production right now, if the Stars don't feel they're in, I think a lot of teams, like Joe Pavelski, he'd have to be near the top of your trade bait board when we get into middle of February.
Yeah, I mean, he'd certainly be up there. He's been so good. And yes, I think it's not just, the interesting thing is, it's not just this season. Like, you go back to last year, he was almost a point per game player. And in a shortened year, 56 games, still had 25 goals.
I know.
He really there hasn't been a lot of drop off there. And it actually got me wondering, like, so Joe Pavelski, age 37, turns 38 next season. What does that next contract look like?
Yeah.
Is it 2 times 6? Is it 2? Like, you could make the argument, he's at 7 now. You could make the argument that he deserves every bit of what he's been making.
Oh yeah. And
it's got to be a multi-year deal, does it not?
I would think so. The interesting one for me will be, does Joe Pavelski, who's had an unreal career, does he take less to go to a team that he thinks is like a legit top 4 or 5 playoff contending team? And if you're going to go to one of those teams, you probably have to take a little bit less. Like, Colorado, would you do 1 year in Colorado because it's the last year of Nathan MacKinnon's deal, knowing that, hey, Colorado's pretty good? Like, now maybe they win this year. They got a very good chance of winning. But I wonder about Pavelski. If he looks at his career, he's done everything. He's been to a Stanley Cup final. He just hasn't won a Stanley Cup. Mm-hmm. And, I think he's made millions and millions. So would
66 million.
Yeah. Would he potentially look to say, you know what, I don't need to get the most I can get. I want to go where I think I have a really good chance. There's no guarantee in the NHL, but a really good chance to win.
Makes sense to me. I mean, I just think that he doesn't really need to sacrifice the payday given how well he's played. Like, I don't think there's going to be a fall off the cliff year next year where a team would have to worry about that. So he's still going to be making good money, is the point.
Another topic we're going to dig into a little bit more on the Daily Faceoff show, Frank. Of course, we're officially at the midway point of the season, or unofficially. Mm-hmm. I know some teams have played more than 40,
we've passed it in terms of number of games.
Yeah. So the midway rankings when it comes to a Hart Trophy, if I had to tell, like, right now, this might be the most competitive wide open race for a Hart Trophy that I can think of in a long time. I can't see one clear, obvious winner at the halfway point. Do you?
Not even close. And we just went through this exact exercise, and you participated as well. You can check out our ballots on dailyfaceoff.com. We went through all the major awards: Hart, Norris, Calder, Vezina, GM of the Year, Jack Adams, and also a little fun wrinkle was the comeback player of the year. And I had the hardest time with my Hart Trophy ballot, just picking the top 3. Usually we do the top 5, but it's difficult this year. Like, I could make a case for so many, compelling candidates. I ended up going with Nazem Kadri at number 1. I just think he's been so incredibly consistent for Colorado this year. In addition to being right up there with the points leaders, I had Jonathan Huberdeau at number 2 and Kirill Kaprizov at number 3. But I think you could make a case for, I'm going to say 5 other guys at least.
Yeah. Well, I had Ovi at number 1 on mine.
Okay. So give me your top 3.
Well, I had Ovi at number 1. Funny enough, same as you. I had Huberdeau at number 2. Then, because to me, this is based on midway rankings, and I don't want to base it on reputation. Because if you base it on reputation, lots of people would say, well, McDavid and Draisaitl. And, maybe
I definitely wouldn't be giving it to Nazem Kadri if that's what we were doing. It's solely based on who has been the best, most valuable player to his team at the midway point, based on what we know right now, not projecting what's happening in the future, just what's happened to this point.
My third, Frank, was probably a little bit out there.
Okay.
I went with Chris Kreider.
Okay.
And I know people are going to look, well, he's got the goal totals, but the thing was, a lot of these guys, like, I looked at Colorado and I'm like, well, yeah, I could really go with Nazem Kadri, but man, I really like, I also like Cale Makar. Now Cale Makar is easy top 3 in the Norris. There's no debate. I think everybody.
But the defensemen have their own award.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but you
could make that same, like what you said about the Avs, you could say that about Kreider and the Rangers. You're like, yes, well, the best player on the Rangers is Panarin or Shesterkin.
Yep. You could and in Edmonton, you got McDavid and Draisaitl. So yeah, that's what made it difficult for me. Huberdeau and Ovechkin, I just felt like those 2 guys, when I looked and I compared to the next players on their team so far this season, that's what I had them as 1 and 2 for me. They're just a little bit above everybody. They don't necessarily have, and they have really good supporting staff, but they're standing above the rest. That's why I had them 1, 2.
So here's why I didn't vote for Ovechkin. And it's not to take anything away from his season, because he's added a dimension to his game that didn't previously exist with the playmaking capability and the assists that he's piled up. It's the inconsistency for me. And the Caps have actually really struggled for a significant chunk now. And Ovechkin went really quiet for a long time. He had an unbelievable first quarter, and the second quarter just wasn't nearly as good. And as a result, his team has struggled in addition. I mean, they are obviously in a clear and safe playoff spot with their .633 points percentage, but really since US Thanksgiving, they've been a very marginal, very average team. So that's why I struggled with Ovechkin. But like, we didn't even mention some of the other guys you could make a case for. Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah.
Steven Stamkos. I mean, there's lots of guys that Brad Marchand, I think, could be in that conversation.
Well, would anybody be surprised if McDavid or Draisaitl put him in the conversation by the end of the year? Like, you look at Draisaitl.
But that's not the exercise.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. That's what makes this so hard at the halfway, because people freak out at the halfway point. He said, that's how close it is. Some guys who easily won't be on my top 3 ballot could easily be top 3 on my ballot by the end of the season. That's what's crazy about it.
Yeah, I wonder, by the way, and speaking of the Avs, obviously they feature pretty prominently across a lot of these awards. I have Makar in the number 1 spot for the Norris. I had Jared Bednar as my Jack Adams winner at the midway point. And I think you look at how that team struggled to start with all the expectations that they had. Like, it's hard to fathom now with the 19, I think, straight wins on home ice.
Yeah.
that there were like people calling for his head in the first couple weeks of the season saying this guy, he's on the hot seat. Should he be fired? And he got an extension and everything calmed down. Like he found a way with this team to get them back on track. And part of it was just guys out of the lineup and injuries. And that's the thing when I think this is Nathan MacKinnon's third separate stint out of the lineup, and he's going to miss the All-Star game. They revealed he underwent surgery for a facial fracture. Just an unfortunate play for Nathan MacKinnon. But that kind of, to me, upped Nazem Kadri's case for the Hart. And that's kind of how I got there was, yes, they've had a fantastic year from Mikko Rantanen. Yes, Gabriel Landeskog has been really good, and Cale Makar has been excellent. But Kadri has been the guy that's shown up every night. And I don't know. I just thought with the way that he's played, tied for third in points with Ovechkin, with McDavid, he just deserved a little extra recognition.
No, he was good. It's hard. The thing that I had Ovechkin, I know people will say, well, you had Ovechkin, but then you had Kreider third. But Ovi's 5-on-5 play without Backstrom really impressed me this year. And I loved it. Like I would agree with you. The Hart Trophy definitely had the most candidates where I was like, well, geez, I could have this guy in. I could have had Kaprizov. I could have had Gaudreau.
Where the Wild without Kaprizov?
Yeah, like Draisaitl's second in the league in scoring, right? And he's right up there in goals. But, Edmonton had a bad 6-week stretch, so that's hurt them for now. But, to me, the season-long award, it might come down to, which guy really elevates down the stretch. And the one team I couldn't overlook, though, I went with Sullivan as my head coach. The Pittsburgh Penguins, they had Malkin out for a long time. Crosby was out. He came back from injuries, and all they do is win. Like, it's been amazing. Like, look at the gap they made up on those teams. It looked like it was a 3-horse race for a while in their division, and now the Penguins are right up there. I love what Sullivan's done, but I had Bednar as one of my top 3 as well, but I had Sullivan number 1.
Yeah, I had Tristan Jarry as third on my Vezina. And it's fun to look at the goalies because in the Professional Hockey Writers Association, we don't vote for the Vezina. So
no.
I always like taking a look at the goalies at the midway point. Tristan Jarry, especially with the question marks entering this year, for him to bounce back and play as well as he has. And that kind of is a natural segue to this is another really interesting award that you could go a million different ways on, which is the Comeback Player of the Year. Who's the guy? It's not just someone that has overcome significant injury or illness. It's also someone that's bounced back after a subpar stretch of play.
Yeah.
That was the criteria for voting. And I had Sergey Bobrovsky number 1. He's, with that $10 million cap hit, I think, if you're the Panthers, obviously it was a difficult conversation to even think about having, but with Spencer Knight stepping in and playing in the playoffs last year, you're thinking there's no chance that Sergei Bobrovsky is going to reclaim the crease, let alone play as well as he had. And a fellow Russian was right behind him for me in Vladimir Tarasenko. The injuries, the botched shoulder surgeries, the trade request to come back and reestablish himself as one of the legitimate snipers in the league. Matt Duchene has been really good. Tony DeAngelo has very quietly had a good season, and I think emphasis on very quietly. Like, you haven't heard boo from him. No tweets, no Instagram posts, no ruffling of feathers, nothing. Evgeny Kuznetsov has been like, there's so many different ways you could go. You could even make a case for Kadri as Comeback Player of the Year.
Hey, don't overlook Timo Meyer in San Jose.
Yeah.
Like, Timo Meyer had 31 points last year. He had 12 goals. And he's already got 47 points. So he was in my top 3. Yeah, there's lots of guys who have bounced back. Matt Duchene, I had in my top 3 as well. Like, Duchene's he's bounced back. But Nashville, their second half though last year, like I said it, this one regret I have at the start of the season was I overlooked how good Nashville was for basically the second half of last year. They were excellent. And
John Hines deserves a lot of credit. Like, he should have or could have been on my Jack Adams list. Like, he's that, what's the difference with Nashville this year is they're so hard to play against. They're dogged competitors.
Yeah. Well, look at their third line, man. They've got the most unheralded. No one talks about him, but look how effective the rookie Tanner Genoa has been. He's got 13 goals. He's second in fights. He's top 5 in hits. He kills penalties. And he scores all his goals 5-on-5, basically. Like, this guy, to be a third line player, like, he's given you literally at 5-on-5, top 5 production. He's been amazing. Him and Trenin are bookends, and they just wear the hell out of you.
I'm not certain that Tanner Genoa won't be a finalist for the Calder when it's all said and done. I had a really hard time leaving him off my top 3. I went with Zegras 1. He's up there in point totals, and the way that he's scored and produced points this year has just been off the charts. The manner, the style, the character. It's Sider number 2, the minutes he's playing on the back end, in addition to the points that he's putting up. And then I went with Anton Lundell because of the defensive workload and assignments that he's picked up for Florida, in addition to the points. Like, he's looking like a special player. But I really wanted to give Genoa that third spot just based on the goals, based on the even strength, the size, the story too. Like, I love a guy that's worked his way up from the ECHL.
Oh, well, you think about where he was last year. He started in the ECHL for a few games. Then he went to the AHL, and he had 21 points in 13 AHL games. And then he gets called up, and he has 5 goals in the final 15 games of the season for the Preds. Like, he's already got 18 goals, Frank, and he in basically his first 60 NHL games. Like, that's huge production. Huge
out of
production.
nowhere. And like, that's like, who gets the credit in that case? Like,
well, honestly, I'll tell you, Frank, I know Genoa from Moose Jaw when he was, and I saw him in Moose Jaw as a rookie when he scored in his draft year. He was a rookie in the WHL. He scored 1 goal. And Tanner Genoa, and we're going to get him on the pod. He'll be the first to tell you that just his skills at that point at 17 were not very good. He worked so hard every year to improve. As a 20-year-old, he was a 40-40 man, 40 goals, 40 assists. But the thing about Genoa is, like, that guy gets a ton of credit, I think, for his work ethic. But you got to give, I'll give Tim Hunter, his coach in junior, some credit. He really worked with him to improve just his skill set, to be a guy who wasn't just big and physical. He's strong. He'll fight anybody. Like, he's tough. You saw him dismantle Logan Stanley the other day. But I seeing his just work ethic to improve. I ran into David Poyle in Edmonton and kind of asked him about Genoa, and you know what? David, to his credit, was just like, yeah, like, we'd be lying if we said we saw this coming, except he said the one thing we liked about Genoa was he progressed every year in junior and just worked hard on all the small details of his game. So he gets a lot of credit, I think.
So Genoa gets the bulk of the credit, but like, you still need to have a team take a chance and give you a contract is one.
100%.
And then the other part is like the Preds development staff. You don't just get from ECHL to NHL by snapping your fingers. Like, there's a process that unfolds that clearly there was a lot of work put in with him directly as well.
Yeah, no, he's a great story. And I think, I know he plays in Nashville, but they're a good team and maybe he gets overlooked, but he's just a fun story to watch. And you look at if he continues to progress like that, like, he could be a power forward because he's so big and strong. Mm-hmm. He'll fight. He can score goals. He's not just, back when you had big guys who fought, because he's second in the NHL. I know there's not a lot of fights now, but he's got 8 fights. That's a lot by today's standard. But he's also got 13 goals and he kills penalties. Like, right. He's doing everything for you. It's John Hines has got to be like loving this guy and what he can do. And to trust a rookie, Frank, to be one of your top 4 penalty killers, that just doesn't happen very often.
No, but you caught my attention on our last pod because you said you thought that the Preds were a candidate in your eyes to really go the other direction a bit in the second half, to be not the team that they were in the second half last year. Do you see them falling out of a playoff spot?
I don't see them falling out of a playoff spot, but I see them falling down the standings. Like, if you look at they got a really high shooting percentage collectively as a team. And usually that sort of thing evens out over time, right? Because when you look at their team, can you have an 11.5 shooting percentage? Like, that's just hard to maintain. So I think the Preds are still a playoff team. What's the usual
average? Like 9 or?
Yeah, 9. Now it can vary, like, and I'm talking overall, but yeah, usually like that's just a little bit high, right? But the wild card is UC Saros. And the other thing, Frank, is can they continue to play him as often as they do?
It's rare to see it.
Yeah, like he's only not started 8 of their games. Or maybe it's 9, maybe it's 9 now, but still, either way, it's a ridiculous amount. And I just wonder if they're going to have to dial him back a little bit in the second half, and that might cost them a few wins. I think they're a playoff team for sure, but it might cost them home ice advantage.
Okay,
Plus, they're also in a tough division.
So speaking of sliding in the standings, on a 1 to 10 scale, what is your level of panic for the Winnipeg Jets?
Oh, it'd be a 10 right now, Frank. I look at, first of all, Minnesota, Nashville, Colorado, St. Louis. I think they're all good. I don't see any of them sliding out of the playoffs. The Jets, they got to play way better. And now Edmonton's found their game. They added Kane. I think they're going to be way better. Calgary had a little bit of a dip. I think they're coming back. LA's a competitive team. So Anaheim, they're going to have to beat out some of those teams two of those teams for sure to get into the postseason. I don't see how they're going to do it. Their defense hasn't been as good this year. Injuries, like Blake Wheeler's not the same since he's come back. The Jets have a hard schedule in the second half in that division. So I would say right now, if I was a Jets fan, my concern would be 10 because they're projected, I think, Frank, mid-80s right now to get points?
Yeah, something like 83, 84. Like they're going to need at least 94 to get in. They got a lot of work to do. And they haven't had any of the consistency to really do it. They've been all over the map. And, there's been so many interesting comments. Blake Wheeler saying that this is the most adversity he's dealt with in the 14 years that he's played in the NHL. Like, he played in Atlanta. I mean, I guess that goes to show you or tells you what it's been like for the Jets. Paul Maurice stepping down is a big one, but he kind of trotted out a narrative Blake Wheeler did the other day that I didn't get or understand. He said, we have a really young hockey team. And I was like, what? And I guess I could see if you want to talk about the role that Cole Perfetti's playing or maybe the fourth line and the different rookies that have been through there this year. But that's not a young core. That's a core that's been there for a long time. Wheeler, Scheifele, Ehlers, Connor, Kopp, on the back end, Morrissey, Stastny,
Hellebuck,
Brendan Dillon, Hellebuck, Nate Schmidt. Like these guys have been around for a long time.
Yeah. No,
and I know that there were a lot of changes, sort of in the last year, especially on the back end, but I picked this team to win the Stanley Cup because I really liked the core that they had assembled. They had been there and experienced and tasted some success. And this was supposed to be the year that they would take another step forward. And for them to not make the playoffs would be a colossal failure. Not only a colossal failure, but my question to you would be, what do you do if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff?
Well, they'll probably get a new coach, right? That would be the easiest, obvious answer, I think. Dave Lowry's more on an interim basis right now. So that would be the easy one to say, hey, we got to just go in a different direction, somebody outside the organization. You start there. I think he might move one of his wingers to augment his defense core, right? Because the advantage they have, Frank, is they've got Connor Hellebuck. And even Hellebuck's numbers.
He's been average.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Average for him.
This year it's shown that if Hellebuck's not standing on his head, their defense core can be exposed a bit. And that's, I think, what we're seeing this year. Whereas last year, Hellebuck, even when they beat Edmonton in the playoffs, Hellebuck, you can look at all the numbers, what's the term they say, goalied? Well, maybe, he was unreal. He kind of won them that series. And this year, he hasn't been able to carry them and save them as often as he was the last few years. So I think that plays a part in it too. So if you're them, you're like, do we have to major panic? Probably not, because we've got a really good goalie. Let's just improve a few pieces in front of him.
Yeah, but they've also got Stastny as a pending UFA and Kopp as a pending UFA. Think back to the last number of years, when the Jets didn't have it a few years ago, Kevin Cheveldayoff pulled the plug, did he not?
Yeah. Well, I think he'll trade. I think he's trading Stastny for sure. You look at his age, I think there's a good chance he'll be moved. Kopp is the interesting one for me. They really like him, but he's a guy who's poised to get a big raise, and the Jets
Huge
don't
raise.
necessarily have boatload of cap space.
Nope. It's an interesting team. I don't know where you go or what you do.
Yeah, well, I think he's going to have to accept, maybe by the time we get to the trade deadline, it'll probably be a little bit more clear for them. and it might allow them to move it off because Andrew Copp, Frank, that's the guy we should talk about more. I think he's a player, if he's available, there would be lots of interest in.
Yeah,
He's
but I wonder,
player.
so then you're the Jets. You move Copp.
Mm-hmm.
How do you replace him?
Well, I think they hope that Cole Perfetti, with more experience, becomes a guy who can produce.
Yeah, well, I think the only thing for the Jets is they've got a few more weeks of runway, and that's it. Like, they've got a little bit of time to make a statement here, 3-4 weeks before those conversations really kick into high gear. And you hear Pierre-Luc Dubois say after the game in St. Louis that he really felt like they had won for the first time in a while the right way. And, he thought that might be a big turning point. They're in Philly to close things out before the break. Let's see where the Jets are on the other side.
Yeah, well, we started with Philly today, Frank. And obviously, if you look, hey, if there's a team that you should be able to beat the way they're playing right now, it would be the Flyers. But look at their when they come back. They got Minnesota, Dallas, Nashville, Minnesota, Edmonton, Calgary, Dallas, Colorado in the month of February. Now, they also have a game against Seattle and Arizona mixed in there, and Chicago.
So you're saying, like, kind of by the end of February, you'll be able to call it one way or the other?
Yeah, I think 100%, because you look at their tough schedule. What, they got 10 games, 7 of them are against really good teams in February. So they're going to have to win some big games. If they do, then maybe they got a chance. But if not, it could be an easy
math is not
decision.
In their favor.
Yeah, it could be an easy decision for Cheveldayoff. Few other quick ones I want to get to, Frank. Some just kind of notes around the league. The taxi squad is scheduled to end on Wednesday night after the game, and then you have the break for the All-Star, and no plans for it to come back. So, I've talked to some teams. They're like, well, it's nice to have options. Some coaches are like, no, I don't like it because there's too many healthy scratches. And then you're trying to manage guys being happy because, if you're in the minors, that's one thing. You're kind of out of sight, out of mind, but at least you're playing. This way, you've got guys on the taxi squad that are sitting around the team like last year, and they're not playing, and they can get a little grumpy, and I get it. So that's not coming back unless there's some like massive outbreak. But considering how many players,
considering the changes that the NHL is making to the protocol, I don't think you're going to need it.
No,
look at the NFL. We're now down to championship Sunday, Super Bowl is all that's left, and they're not even testing anymore. Like, they're not testing, period. Like, they're not even testing for symptomatic players. You have to volunteer yourself and tell them that you have symptoms in order to get a test. That's where we've reached with the NFL. And it's not a coincidence to me that on the back end of the All-Star break, not only do the numbers make sense for the NHL in terms of the number of players that have had COVID-19 this season, north of 75% and north of 60% since December 11th. It's also like we rejigged the schedule and now we need to get it done. And the other part is we need to have a playoffs that have integrity. So you can't have 8 guys on one team that test positive, that are asymptomatic, that can't play. Yeah. You can't contest a playoff series that way. So these changes kind of come in at the perfect time of, hey, this is how it's going to be for the next while. Everyone get used to it. And this is how it's going to be for the playoffs. So, the NHL gets rid of asymptomatic testing. By the way, if you missed it and did not see Dallas Eakins' Instagram of the Anaheim Ducks, some hilarious videos and photos. He, of course, has been out with COVID-19, tested positive, missed the Ducks' entire road trip. They went to Eastern Canada and he couldn't cross the border, even though he was healthy and would have been cleared in the US. And he, I don't know if you saw it, but he would post blew my nose this morning and got rid of COVID. And now I just completed a 20-mile bike ride in the mountains. It was unbelievable. Hey, I just went on an 8-mile hike. And here's a video of my hike. This is what an asymptomatic coach is doing to pass time while he's not with his team, which is 2,500 miles away.
Yeah, it's, I think it's time that there's definitely got to be a little bit of a readjustment in overall people's view of this. I think it's hard for anybody to doubt the vaccines have done their job for what it's like, but now you have to accept that it's going to be around. I think the pro leagues are doing that, and I wonder if you see more of it, because you can't live in fear. You have to make educated decisions based on actual data and move forward from it. And I hope we see that more in every walk of life, to be honest. I would like to see that. I think.
And that's not me making light of it, by the way. Like we've talked the last couple of pods when I had COVID 2 weeks ago that, I was down and out, and it was, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And there were moments where I was nervous when I had shortness of breath and all those things. So I'm not making light of it. I also think
you were vaccinated.
And I was vaccinated. I think the other part of it is that people need to begin to make their own choices. You look at Canada and fans not being able to attend games. Like, look at the games being played in the US. Like there doesn't seem to be mass outbreaks linked to games. Like there's been no proof of that. If a fan wants to buy a ticket and wear a mask and go to the game, then they should be able to do so.
Yeah, hey, I'm with you. I know that Alberta's got at least 50%, but man, you look at Ontario and Quebec, and that's really going to impact the bottom line for a lot of teams. And then obviously,
how's it impacting the Jets? We just talked about the Jets. Like they've played how many home games now without any fans in the building? Yeah. Has it impacted their season?
I think valid. Like it is. I think last year when everybody got used to it, you don't like it, but you're used to it. Then you go back to having fans. And you're like, wow, this is great again. Now I know how awesome it is. And then you go home games, and there are certain times in a game where the fans can really inject some emotion to a team. I don't think there's any debate on that. Sometimes, fans are smart enough. They say, hey, our team needs a boost. Here's a big hit. Now they're going crazy or whatever. You don't have that. And I think when you're pushing the boulder uphill, like you're a team like the Jets that are teetering on the brink, Frank, I think it can make a difference, no question. And I think there's a huge emotional loss that the teams who don't have fans right now in Winnipeg and in Montreal and Toronto and Ottawa, I think that's a big disadvantage for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hit to the bottom line. We know that. It obviously hasn't affected some teams as much as others. Like I think Toronto has kind of been cruising along, but it's really odd for these teams. Like they also are doing this only at home. It's got to feel like, especially for those players that are traveling, playing for the Leafs, you play a home game in front of an empty building, and then you go on the road and you play in front of a full building somewhere else, like two different worlds.
Yeah, you're probably jacked up more on the road games. You're like, hey, maybe it takes away the home advantage from the teams, because suddenly the Leafs are like, because I've always talked to players and like, when the building's loud, and even though it's not cheering for you, you still get an emotional lift for it.
I just can't believe that we're another 6 weeks away, at least, from getting that back again.
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
That's the hard part to stomach, I think.
I think there definitely has to be some conversations to look and say, okay, what are, we can make projections on stuff. Guys come back from injuries early. Is there data that suggests maybe this is something they can come back from early? I'm not smart enough. I haven't looked at all the data, but people who do might want to look at that. Tyler Remchuk is traveling home today. He was out at the outdoor tournament out at Jasper with the fellas.
Sad I couldn't make it there. I was supposed to go. I was supposed to make the Team Oilers Nation debut, the La Bamba sweater, and I tested positive for COVID and couldn't cross the border.
Well, yeah, but you got to shovel, Frank, and you got to teach your kids how to ski.
Oof, that's an adventure. Any parent that has to do that or tries to do it, like full marks, because it is a sweaty, nerve-wracking adventure with a
honest
5 and 7
question. Is there an option of ski lessons? Like, could you not have just saved your sanity and put them in ski lessons?
You could, but have you ever watched someone try and teach ski lessons?
Yeah, my son went to it. We have the junior ski team at Rabbit Hill. It was awesome. He loved it.
But I feel like that's a little different where you are versus where I am. I don't know that we're dealing with the best ski instructors.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah,
like they're
with our bunny hills here.
Oh, no, they're unreal at the Rabbit Hill where he went to learn how to ski. And then now when we go to the mountains, like to Jasper or Banff, usually the first half morning we have him, because he's only 8. So as a refresher lesson, he gets a lesson all morning. And it's one-on-one. Sometimes there's 2 kids in a group, and he goes, because he knows how to ski somewhat now, pretty good. He can go on most of the runs actually with us. Like we went to the Knob last year at the top of the mountain, and he came. Now there's some, green dot, like easier hills, but he went all the way from the top down.
What do you normally ski? What's your, like, are you good?
No, wow.
Are you like a black diamond guy or no?
I can go black diamond, Frank, but I'll be honest, I didn't ski for 20 years and my wife was a skier. And so the first time, and I told her, I said, hey, I can get down the hill. You don't want to ever show a video of how to ski with me. I can get down the hill.
You're not getting style points, you're saying?
Yeah, she was expecting me to be terrible. She's like, you're actually pretty good. So skiing to me, we skied a lot when I was younger. So, but I did the last time I went with my family. I left them and I said, I'm going to take a different path. And I went on a double black diamond, which I hadn't done. Dude, I'll admit, as I was going down it, like my legs were burning. And there was a few times where I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to wipe out here and this is going to be life over. So I didn't go on a double diamond run after that. The rest of the day, I can do the black diamond, no problem, but double black, I can't do.
No, I'm a blue square, green.
Yeah, I like the blue squares. Hey, you go fast. You don't
There's
feel
nothing
like you're
wrong with that. I don't
racing.
need to go fast. Honestly, at this point, and as I was going to say, as fat as I am, I don't need anything like out of control. Just nice and easy all the way down.
See, the hardest part I have is my son now is a pretty good skier, but he wants me to follow him. And so he goes through the trees. Well, his skis are like half the distance of mine. So he's cutting around trees. And that's where I'm more nervous.
That's the hardest part. I actually, like, growing up playing hockey, I'd prefer really, really short skis.
Oh,
if they could support me to get down the mountain.
Yeah. So
what do they call those? Like the snow skis or whatever it's called?
Yeah.
Like those are awesome.
Yeah. So the longer, because, I don't know what I'm running now, like a 190 or something, but he's got like a 110 or 120 because he's only 8. And so he's like, Dad, follow me. Yeah, sure. And all of a sudden we get in the trees and I'm like I literally almost hit 2 trees. And I was like, you hit your ski on a tree, dude. Like my groins are tight enough as it is. That'll not be, I would be out for a long time. So I am looking forward though. We have a ski trip planned. So I'm looking forward to it because
you can't even call what we have here skiing out east. Like it's like it's ice and it's like you're down the mountain in 3.5 minutes and you wait longer for your ride back up.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Well, Frank, you know what? You got to fly the family out. We'll fly out family next week and next winter. And guess what? Your kids will go in the lessons all morning and you don't have to worry about anything. And then in the afternoon, you ski with them because now they've learned how to ski. It's the greatest thing. Everybody who goes to the mountains with kids, you should have them with the ski instructors in the morning. It's better for both of you. They get better and you get to ski.
Sounds good. I just feel like in some ways that might be, I don't know. I could see my wife being like, that's bad parenting.
No, it isn't.
Leaving your kids with a ski instructor while you go and enjoy yourself.
Well, hey, I don't think it's bad. I think that's good parenting.
All I can tell you is I was just buckled trying to get everyone going. Because honestly, just even getting them to the hill, a 5 and a 7-year-old, like we had just gotten the skis on and my daughter's crying, I hate skiing. Like it's an adventure. I'm telling you, man.
Oh, dude, I love it, man. Oh, adventures of parenting
teach them
sometimes
early.
are because everybody now who has kids older than you, Frank, is listening to this and laughing because they remember what it's like and they're like, I'm so happy I don't have to do that. But it's once you get through it, it's always funnier to watch someone else because I can see, here's Frank Seravalli. He's coming down the hill. He's got his 5-year-old daughter in one arm. She's crying. His 7-year-old son's throwing his poles. He's wiped out. He's pissed. And you're trying to figure out both of them. Oh my God.
And then I have my wife with me that's never skied before in her life.
Even better. So now you're trying to
get to the top of this bunny hill. She's never been on a lift before. My daughter's never been on a lift before. I'm just trying to make sure everyone gets off the lift and doesn't die. And then we're at the top trying to get down and everyone's like, I hate this. I'm not doing this. And I'm like, why did I even come here?
How do you keep cool though? Like, do you keep calm or do you snap?
No, I actually because everyone is panicking around me, I'm just like,
okay.
It's the only way you can be is to try and calm everyone down.
Did you crush like 5 beers though when you got home?
No, I wish. I've actually gone alcohol free since COVID. So it's been a very dry January for me trying to make sure that I don't buckle my body. So
good for you. Well, we look forward to the next time you can have a beverage.
Yeah, me too.
At the draft, maybe. We'll be there in Montreal. Definitely have to have one there.
Perfect.
Okay, Frankie, good to talk to you. Tyler Yaremchuk will be back. Of course, that was episode 101 of the DFO Rundown. Gregor and Seravalli, brought to you by DoorDash. Get it delivered. Did you have struggles, Frank? Could you even get DoorDash when you guys got a foot of snow?
It snowed so much. The waits were so long to get a dasher out here. I guess business was good for DoorDash.
Awesome. We'll keep ordering from them. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to everybody on Friday.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Seravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode. Delivered by DoorDash.